Hey guys, tonight we're traveling way back to a time when the air smells like olives, the sandals are dusty, and the gods, well, they have nothing better to do than mess with mortals. Welcome to ancient Greece, where one divine figure decides to invent theater not out of love for art, not to elevate the human spirit, but because he's got a bone to pick with his critics. Yep, tonight you meet Dionysus, the god of wine madness, fertility, and according to some slightly bitter scholars, petty revenge via curtain call. Imagine yourself under a starlit sky, lying on a cool marble step, lulled by the chirping of cicadas and the scent of pine. You hear laughter in the distance, and maybe a scream. Is that music, or someone transforming into a tree? Hard to tell with Greek mythology. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Are we sharing this moment across oceans? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes into a festival, one you didn't ask to attend, and definitely weren't prepared for. People are dancing, like their feet are possessed, their eyes wild, their faces painted with something that might be wine or blood. You're not sure. Someone hands you a goblet. There's no water in sight. Welcome to the world of Dionysus. Unlike Zeus, who prefers lightning bolts and infidelity, or Apollo, who's too perfect to be fun at parties, Dionysus is chaos in human form. He's the guy who crashes a serious dinner with a conga line of satyrs and leaves the host rethinking their life choices. He doesn't just inspire parties, he embodies them in all their messy, euphoric, regrettable glory. But here's the twist behind the glitter grapes and goat songs. Dionysus harbors a grudge, actually several. You see, he's not your typical Olympian. He doesn't have a palace in the clouds or a shining chariot. No, his throne is on the edge of civilization, in the wild places where rules break down and mortals lose their minds, sometimes literally. And that's where theater comes in. Because what better way to mock the establishment than by making it applaud its own undoing? Theater for Dionysus is performance as punishment. He gives humans masks, scripts, and a stage not to celebrate culture, but to reveal how absurd, fragile, and downright silly human pride can be. You step into his myth like it's a dream, or a hallucination, or maybe both. Picture this: the vines curl around your ankles as you walk. The sky hums with something ancient. A flute plays in the distance, no melody, just notes that pull at your spine. Somewhere out there, a woman screams, not in terror, but in ecstasy. Or fury. It's hard to tell with maenads. They don't really do half measures. And right at the center of it all is Dionysus, watching, smiling, planning. He hasn't invented theater yet, not officially. But the signs are there. The drama, the audience, the blurred line between illusion and truth. You're already in Act 1, and you don't even know your role. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was originally a foreign god imported into Greece, or a native deity whose worship spread later. What's clear is that his cult looked different. Wild, feminine, disruptive, not the clean, orderly kind of religion that made polite citizens feel civilized. No, his rituals involved music that rattled your bones, dances that spun you into trance, and wine, always wine. And because of that, Dionysus was feared, not because he was violent, though he could be, but because he was unpredictable. You couldn't reason with him. You couldn't bribe him with sacrifices and hope he'd leave your crops alone. If you ignored Dionysus, he didn't smite you. He made you lose your mind, like a god-sized prankster whispering, "Don't take yourself so seriously, mortal. You're wearing sandals held together with string." Here's the cheeky part. Dionysus didn't want to be worshipped in temples. He wanted followers in forests, in torchlit processions, in midnight plays where the lines between actor and character, god and man, truth and illusion disappeared. And that's where you find yourself. On the edge of something big. Something weird. You're not in a temple. You're in a world slowly becoming a stage. According to a quirky tidbit from ancient sources, Dionysus once disguised himself as a mortal and convinced a town to let him host a party. When they refused, he turned the women into frenzied maenads and the men into dolphins. Because of course he did. That's the energy you're dealing with here. So why would a god like this invent theater? The better question might be, how couldn't he? He was the embodiment of roleplay, the master of disguise. His whole myth is about transformation. He's born, he dies, he comes back again. Sometimes he's a beautiful youth. Sometimes he's bearded and wild. He's the only Olympian who fully understands masks, and he's not afraid to wear one just to mess with your expectations. It's no accident that the very symbol of theater, the comedy and tragedy masks, is tied to Dionysus. They weren't just for performance. They were sacred. Sacred and hilarious. Because what's more Dionysian than watching someone cry on stage while a drunk guy in the audience sobs louder because he thinks it's about his ex-wife? You settle in. The play is only beginning. And the script? It's about to get a lot weirder. You find yourself standing in a strange place. It's not quite a dream, not quite a memory, more like a play mid-performance where the script has gone missing. A warm breeze carries the scent of honey and something fermented. The stage is set, but no actors appear. That's because the main character hasn't arrived yet. Or rather, he hasn't been born. Or, wait, he has. Twice. See, Dionysus isn't your average born and crowned god. He's the poster child for divine absurdity. A being who refuses to enter the world in a normal way. And wouldn't you if your entire personality revolved around contradiction? Your feet crunch softly over golden leaves as you follow whispers through the myth. Whispers of a baby born from a mortal woman and a lightning bolt. Semele, let's talk about her. A mortal princess, beautiful and doomed, and the object of Zeus's wandering eye. The two begin a love affair that surprise ends in tragedy. But before things go full, Greek soap opera Semele gets pregnant. And that's when things heat up. Literally. You've probably heard the story. Hera, Zeus's wife and Olympian queen, of I told you so, is not thrilled. So she visits Semele in disguise and plants a seed of doubt. Are you sure he's really Zeus? I mean, wouldn't a real god prove it? Poor Semele, belly full of future chaos, demands Zeus show himself in his true form. Zeus warns her it's a bad idea. His divine presence is intense. But love makes you bold, or foolish, or both. So Zeus appears in his full glory, thunder, lightning, sparkle overload, and Semele is incinerated on the spot. You wince, and then wonder how's the baby still there, somehow. In one of mythology's greatest what now moments, Zeus reaches into the ashes, scoops out the unborn Dionysus, and sews him into his own thigh. Yes, his thigh. Because when the womb fails, you improvise. This is Dionysus's first act, born once of a woman and once of a god. A child of contradiction. Half mortal, half divine. Too human for Olympus, too divine for Earth. No wonder he's dramatic. Historians still debate whether the story of Dionysus's double birth represents two separate cults that were later merged, or whether it's a mythological metaphor for his dual nature. Either way, it's very on brand. Dionysus isn't a god who follows clean timelines or single origins. He likes his stories tangled like ivy vines wrapping around your ankles. And you, dear listener, are tangled right in the middle now. Once born thigh fresh and God ready, Dionysus doesn't get a warm welcome on Olympus. The other gods aren't sure what to make of him. He's too earthy, too wild, too fun. So he's sent away, hidden, fostered, passed around like divine hot potato, raised by nymphs in the mountains, or by his mortal aunt Ino, depending on who's telling the tale. Either way, his childhood is shaped by secrecy, survival, and nature. And nature, you quickly realize, isn't peaceful. It's chaotic, a storm of sensations. One moment, you're sipping dew from a flower, the next, you're chased by a bear. Or worse, a satyr with a flute and no sense of personal space. Young Dionysus absorbs it all. The music, the madness, the movement. And slowly something grows inside him, not just power but awareness. The world is a stage, and the gods, they are just as insecure as mortals. You see, Dionysus knows rejection early, knows what it's like to be denied a seat at the celestial table, and like any good anti-hero, he plans his comeback accordingly. One curious fringe theory suggests that the dual birth myth might reflect initiation rites, where initiates symbolically died and were reborn into Dionysus's mysteries. A spiritual metaphor cloaked in drama and divine scandal. It fits him, doesn't it? Always skirting the line between metaphor and madness. So here's Dionysus growing up outside Olympus, outside Thebes, outside order itself. And he doesn't just survive, he flourishes. He finds joy in the wild, in music, in bodies moving without shame, in the freedom of not belonging. And it plants a seed. You feel it too, don't you? That weird tickle at the edge of your mind, the sense that the rules might not be real, that life could be one long improvisation if you just let go. But Dionysus isn't here to make everyone feel free. Not exactly. He's here to remind the world what happens when you deny what's chaotic, what's irrational, what's real. He'll take everything he's learned, his outsider upbringing, his divine trauma, his flair for performance, and create something new. Something that lures you in with music and masks, only to hold up a mirror you didn't know was there. You lie back dizzy now. The stars swirl like wine in a cup. Somewhere a goat bleats in the distance. You're not sure if it's part of the soundtrack or a warning. All you know is, this Dionysus is coming. And he's not just bringing wine, he's bringing theater. You wake, or maybe you never slept in a haze of mist and the faint smell of burnt myrrh. The landscape has changed again. It's warmer, brighter, like you've stepped onto the set of a myth just before the tragedy hits. You hear laughter, the sticky kind, the kind that means someone's about to make a very bad decision in a very beautiful place. And that's when you meet Zeus again. But this time you're watching him through the eyes of a future revenge plot. Let's rewind. Before Dionysus took his place as the patron of masks and madness, he was just a cosmic complication, Zeus's illegitimate son, born from a mortal woman who got barbecued by divine arrogance. You remember Semele, don't you? The princess whose curiosity killed more than just the cat. She didn't survive Zeus's big reveal, but her baby did. Thanks to Zeus's quick thinking and that thigh-sewing trick you still can't unsee, Dionysus was born again. But while Zeus's dramatic rescue sounds noble, don't mistake it for fatherly warmth. This is still Zeus we're talking about. Lightning in his eyes, promises on his lips, and absolutely no ability to take responsibility for, well, anything. You trail behind him invisible as he hurls thunderbolts across mountaintops and seduces yet another nymph who should probably know better. There's no nursery for baby gods, no lullabies, just delegation. Hand the kid off to some distant relative, give him a satyr babysitter, and hope he doesn't turn into a problem. Spoiler, he turns into a huge problem. And yet, something stirs in you as you watch Dionysus grow. There's a softness, a wound he doesn't talk about. It's hard being half mortal in a world of immortals. He doesn't get the respect of the full gods, and he doesn't fit into mortal society either. He's both and neither. And here's the thing. The other Olympians don't realize the gods have rules. Pride, war order. Dionysus doesn't. He's not built for hierarchy. He's built for interruption. So when the time comes and Dionysus starts to reclaim his place in the world, he doesn't head for Olympus. No, he heads straight for the places that forgot him. That mocked him. That told him he wasn't real. Top of the list, the city of Thebes, his mother's hometown, the place where Semele burned, and where nobody believes her son was divine, including Pentheus, the king of Thebes. But hold that thought, he's the kind of critic you'll want to meet properly in a moment. First, picture Dionysus, not as a god, but as a whisper. He's been wandering for years now, through Phrygia, Lydia, India, at least according to one dramatic myth, teaching people to cultivate vines to ferment joy. Everywhere he goes, he leaves a trail of altered minds and loosened limbs, and also, oddly enough, theater-shaped footprints. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's wandering phase represents real cultural exchanges from the East, or if it's just the Greeks imagining their wine god as a sort of exotic ambassador. Either way, his travels build a persona. He becomes the god who doesn't stay put, the god who doesn't just rule, he arrives. And when he does, people usually don't recognize him. That's part of his trick. His divine specialty is appearing mortal, disguising himself, testing you. He shows up with long curls, soft robes, maybe a twinkle in his eye that makes you uncomfortable in a way you can't name. And then he asks you, will you worship me? Most say no. That's when things get interesting. You find yourself watching as Dionysus strolls into cities dressed as a foreigner, not demanding temples or sacrifices, but instead throwing parties in the woods. He brings drums, flutes, strange women, and wine. Always wine. Those who embrace him, they lose their fear, their minds sometimes, but they dance, they feel. Those who reject him, they end up cursed, transformed, or more poetically starred in a living tragedy of their own making. One quirky little fragment from an old comedy suggests that Dionysus once gave a man donkey ears for interrupting a song. That's right. He turned a heckler into a walking joke. You have to admire the commitment. So by the time Dionysus decides to return to Thebes, he's no longer that rejected baby. He's a full-blown divine force. But he doesn't arrive in a chariot of gold. No, he walks in barefoot, disguised as a priest of himself. Let's see if they notice, he seems to say. They don't, especially not Pentheus. But you'll meet him properly in the next act. Right now, you're still standing in the shadow of Olympus, where Dionysus technically should be. But there's no throne for him. Not yet. His siblings have places. Apollo gets the arts. Athena gets wisdom, Ares gets war, even Hermes gets a staff with snakes on it. But Dionysus, he gets suspicion. The other gods see his rituals. They see the women dancing on mountaintops, tearing animals apart in trance. They see the cities where order breaks down after his festivals. And they whisper, he's not like us. He's dangerous. He's theatrical. But isn't that the point? The stage is almost ready now. You can feel it. The hum of tension. The scent of crushed grapes. The sense that somewhere behind a mask, Dionysus is smiling, not kindly. The lights don't dim. There are no lights, just the sun overhead, too bright, too smug. You squint through it, stepping into a forest that shouldn't exist in the middle of a city. Ivy strangles stone. The wind carries giggles high, eerie, not entirely human. Something stirs in the brush. A hoof, a flute. Probably both. You're in Dionysus's childhood now, not the baby thigh sewing part. We've moved past that. This is the weird chapter, the in-between years, the part of the myth where the god of wine becomes, well, the god of wine, and madness, and wild parties, and goats that never survive. Act 3. No palace, no tutors. Dionysus is raised in the wilderness, depending on which myth you believe. Some say he's with mountain nymphs, fed honey and mist. Others say Hermes drops him off with his aunt Ino and her less-than-stable husband. Either way, his caretakers are more woodland rave than responsible guardian. And the friends he grows up with? Let's just say they don't come from Olympus. You meet them one by one. First, the satyrs. Half goat, half man, 100% inappropriate. They dance like their knees are backwards talk, like they've had 3 cups of something fermented before noon, and play pipes that sound like a swarm of bees learned jazz. They're not wise, but they're loyal. Mostly. Then Silenus, the elderly drunk with wisdom hidden beneath a dozen empty wineskins. Silenus is part mentor, part liability. He's the kind of companion who tells you the secrets of the universe and then passes out in a vine bush. You like him immediately. Dionysus does too. These are his people, or close enough. They live between civilization and chaos, which is exactly where he belongs. One fringe tidbit from Orphic tradition claims Dionysus was once torn apart by Titans as a child, only to be reborn from his heart by Zeus. That's right, dismembered toddler god, rebuilt like divine Lego. It's dark, confusing, and very Dionysian. But even if that version doesn't show up in every story, the theme sticks: transformation through destruction. You break, you shift, you come back stranger and more powerful. And so, young Dionysus grows is surrounded by beings who don't quite follow the rules. They don't walk straight. They don't speak in verse. They don't pretend to be noble. They just are. And Dionysus watches, learns, absorbs from the nymphs. He learns rhythm, how water flows, how laughter bursts from the lungs without warning. From the satyrs he learns pleasure, unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. From Silenus, he learns philosophy, which is to say nothing means anything but drink anyway. Historians still argue whether these myths reflect actual rites of passage, young men in ancient Greece undergoing wilderness initiations to become Dionysus, or if they're just stories to explain why the god of wine has such odd roommates. Either way, the message is clear. Dionysus doesn't come from structure. He comes from wildness, and he wears it like a crown. One day, in a glade dripping with mist, Dionysus discovers wine. No, not invents that honor might go to some forgotten human, but he discovers it spiritually. He understands what it means. Not just fermented grapes, not just intoxication, but revelation. You drink and something slips. Your ego, maybe? Your fear? Your sense of being alone. Wine opens a door inside the mind, and Dionysus walks right through. He doesn't bring rules. He brings rhythm. You see it then, the beginning of the dance, the first maenads. The women who leave behind their spinning looms and domestic chores to follow a god into the hills. They don't want temples. They want ecstasy. Release. A scream that no one shushes, and Dionysus gives it to them. He doesn't just build a religion, he builds a movement, one that blurs the line between worship and performance. In one corner of the myth, he teaches a group of mortals how to plant vines. In another, he turns sailors into dolphins for trying to kidnap him. Because his mood unpredictable, his justice poetic, and you're starting to see the theme, aren't you? You never really know Dionysus. You just experience him, which makes him the perfect god for theater. Because theater isn't about knowing, it's about feeling, about pretending long enough to believe, about masks that don't hide, but reveal. You drift now, walking barefoot through his forest of rehearsals. Everywhere around you, laughter and sobbing are separated by a single breath. Someone recites a line from a tragedy you don't know yet. Someone else answers with a flute solo that sounds like tears. You look down. Your own hands are painted. Your feet are dusty. You're not an observer anymore. You're part of the cast. You're running now. Not in fear, but in some wild ancient rhythm that doesn't belong to your body. The forest blurs around you, and you're not quite sure whether you're chasing something or being chased. Either way, Dionysus is near. You can feel him like a song with too much bass thudding behind your ribs. But make no mistake, the god you're about to meet again isn't here to throw a party. He's here to throw revenge. You skid to a stop in a clearing, gasping, your heartbeat echoing like a drumbeat. And there he is, lounging like a panther, in human form robe, off one shoulder, hair a chaotic tangle of ivy and gold. He's smiling, not kindly. This isn't the wine god of lazy vineyard afternoons and sweet festival kisses. No, this is the Dionysus who remembers every insult, every city that mocked him, every king who told his followers to stop dancing. He doesn't forget. He ferments his grudges, because unlike other gods, Dionysus doesn't smite. He doesn't flood. He doesn't turn people to salt. He makes a show of it, a grand, terrible show. And he starts by using his tools, joy, wine, and madness. That's right. For Dionysus, happiness isn't just an emotion. It's a weapon. You think you're laughing, think again. You're unraveling. You're dancing because you have to. You're screaming because your mind won't obey anymore. And the best part? You never even saw it coming. He smiles, wider eyes flickering. And suddenly you understand this isn't just a god. This is a playwright, a puppeteer, a performance artist with a mean streak. There's a story possibly invented, possibly not, about a small island where the locals refused to believe Dionysus was a god. So he made their wine pots overflow, their crops dance, and their animals speak in verse. The people begged for it to stop. He told them the show had only just begun. You chuckle, nervously. This is Dionysus's power. He doesn't take control. He convinces you to give it away willingly. You sip the wine, you wear the mask, you chant the lines, and by the time you realize you're part of his play, you're already halfway through Act 2. Historians still argue whether the madness associated with Dionysus was literal, ritualistic, or metaphorical. Was it ecstatic trance, psychological liberation, or just a lot of fermented grape juice in the sun? No one can agree, which frankly feels like exactly the kind of academic ambiguity Dionysus would love. Because confusion? That's part of the script. He doesn't just take revenge on kings and cities, he makes them write their own downfall. That's the trick. He doesn't raise a sword. He hands them a costume and says, "Go on, play the hero." And then he watches them fall. You think back to some of his most famous performances, like Lycurgus of Thrace, who imprisoned Dionysus's followers and got cursed with madness so deep he tried to prune his vineyard by chopping off his own limbs. Or the daughters of King Minyas, who refused to join the Maenads. So Dionysus made them go mad, turn into bats, or eat their own children, depending on the version. You don't flinch much. These aren't stories of mindless wrath. They're poetic justice. They're curtain calls for arrogance. Because Dionysus doesn't just punish, he reveals. He shows you who you really are when the mask slips, when the wine takes hold, when the music burrows into your spine. And let's be honest, not everyone looks good under that spotlight. You're starting to understand why theater wasn't just entertainment in ancient Greece. It was religion, ritual, a way to face the things no one wanted to say out loud, death, madness, lust, failure, and give them a role to play. And at the center of it all, Dionysus, not just a god, a director. One who hands you the script and waits to see whether you improvise or break. A lesser-known fragment from an ancient vase depicts Dionysus laughing while mortals act out a tragedy, their faces in pain, but the god smiling. It's chilling, and yet somehow fitting. He's not cruel for cruelty's sake. He's just tired of being ignored. You step closer now into his aura. It's warm. Too warm. The smell of grapes, sweat, and incense wraps around you. And he leans in whispering, "Would you like a part in the next play?" You nod. You don't mean to, but you do. Because that's the thing about Dionysus. You don't say no. You say just one more drink. You say, just for fun. You say it's only a play until it isn't. You blink and the forest is gone. The air sharpens. The vines vanish. The laughter of satyrs fades, replaced by the stiff shuffle of sandals on stone. You're in a city now, a real one. Towers rise, markets hum, people walk with purpose. Civilization at last. But you know better than to relax. Because Dionysus is already here, you stand at the gates of Thebes, a proud city structured and sensible, ruled by a man who thinks he understands the world. And walking through its streets right now, uninvited, is a stranger with gold dust in his hair, a smirk he doesn't bother to hide, and an entourage that looks more like a traveling circus than anything sacred. You can't help but smirk too. This isn't a social visit. Dionysus has returned to his birthplace, to the city that rejected his mother. That never acknowledged him. That called him myth. Rumor bastard. Thebes thinks it's safe, rational, immune to divine chaos. That's adorable. Because Dionysus hasn't come to argue, he's come to perform. And tonight's headliner, Justice, served cold with a side of irony. You shadow him as he slips through the alleys. He's not flashy. Not yet. He whispers. He plants seeds. He finds the women, the ones tired of loom work and polite dinner conversations, and he invites them into the woods. What starts with a whisper becomes a tremor. Thebes doesn't know it yet, but something's shifting. The daughters of good families are vanishing, up to the hills where drums now echo at dusk and fires burn all night. The Maenads are rising again. They dance. They scream. They let their hair down literally and spiritually. You watch as mothers forget their children's names, as wives forget their husbands' commands. They don't care. They don't want to care. They belong to Dionysus now. Historians still debate whether these rituals were actually practiced or purely symbolic. Some say women really did retreat into the mountains in states of ecstatic frenzy. Others say it was theatrical metaphor for letting go of societal roles. Either way, the impact was real. It frightened people, especially men, especially one man, King Pentheus. Now here's someone you've been waiting to meet. Picture a man so stiff he probably starches his tunic. A king who believes in order, discipline, and the sound of his own voice. Pentheus doesn't just reject Dionysus, he mocks him publicly, loudly, with the confidence of someone who's definitely going to regret it. You see him now on the palace balcony pacing as reports roll in. The women are dancing in the woods, my king. They've torn apart a bull with their bare hands. They say a god walks among them. Pentheus sneers. Nonsense, he says. Fake news, he adds, though not in so many words. He doesn't believe in Dionysus. And that's his first mistake. His second, trying to stop the play before the curtain rises. You're there when Dionysus is brought before him. In disguise, of course. A gentle-looking foreign priest with soft hands and a lilt in his voice. He's so calm it's unsettling. Pentheus tries to interrogate him, threatens him, chains him, and Dionysus smiles, just smiles. And then the cell collapses. Literally. The walls crack, the chains fall off. Lightning flickers not from Zeus, but from somewhere older. Somewhere closer. You watch Pentheus stagger back, for the first time unsure. The audience shifts in their seats. Something's happening. The script is bending. The god is real, and he's improvising. But Dionysus doesn't kill Pentheus. Not yet. Instead, he offers him a front row seat. Would you like to see the Maenads? He asks, eyes gleaming. Pentheus hesitates. Yes, he says, but I must go in disguise. Dionysus nods. Of course, and with the tenderness of a lover or a trap set with velvet, he dresses the king in women's clothing. A wig, a long robe. He even adjusts the folds. The transformation is complete. You don't laugh. Not yet, because this isn't comedy. It's tragedy. You follow them up the mountain, the sky thick with tension. Dionysus walks ahead humming. Pentheus stumbles, swaying in heels that were never made for kings. And then he sees them, the Maenads. Wild, radiant, terrifying, they dance like fire. Their eyes shimmer with something beyond human comprehension. He's mesmerized. And then they see him, not a god, not a king, just a man spying in a dress. The spell snaps, the drums stop, and in a frenzy that echoes through centuries, they descend. The story goes, depending on the version, that Pentheus is torn limb from limb, that his own mother Agave, driven mad by Dionysus, deals the final blow, thinking he's a lion. You stand at the edge of the scene, frozen. This is theater. The forest is quiet now. No drums, no laughter, no chanting. Just wind through pine needles and a woman's distant sob that sounds like it's breaking something inside the earth. That woman, it's Agave, the mother, the Maenad, the murderer. You saw her last night, dancing radiant wild with purpose. She was the one who climbed the tree. She was the one who led the others. And when she came back down, her arms cradled a trophy. A lion's head, she said, caught spying on the sacred rites of Dionysus. Except it wasn't a lion, it was her son. Pentheus, you close your eyes, but the image clings. Her footsteps crunching over fallen twigs, her expression gleaming with pride, her voice loud and clear as she parades her kill back into the city. And you remember what Dionysus said. Let them see the truth when the wine wears off. You follow Agave back to Thebes now. She's beaming, her arms raised high, the lion's head dripping. The city stares. People whisper. Some cover their mouths. Others turn away. And then slowly her eyes clear. The smile falters. She looks down. And the scream that follows cracks the sky in half. This isn't just tragedy. This is a mirror. This is Dionysus showing Thebes exactly what happens when you try to make sense of something wild, sacred, and irrational with politics and prison cells. You feel it, don't you? That gnawing, crawling discomfort that creeps up your spine. Good. Because that's the point. Dionysus doesn't punish like other gods. He doesn't send floods or plagues. He turns your pride into your executioner. He makes you laugh at someone and then realize it was yourself. He scripts the joke, casts you as the fool, and watches as you take your final bow. Historians still argue over how the myth of Pentheus was first performed, whether it originated in oral tradition or whether it was Euripides who gave it theatrical form in the Bacchae. But either way, one thing's clear. This wasn't just a cautionary tale. It was an act of divine performance art, a way for audiences to feel something too raw to name, then sit with it long after the curtain fell. And Dionysus. He exits the scene not with triumph, but with silence. The job is done. The mask has fallen. The truth is lying in the dirt and everyone saw it. You wander the city now watching people react. Some weep. Others blame the women. A few dare to whisper that Dionysus is cruel, but none deny him anymore. Thebes is changed, not rebuilt, not healed, just changed. Because what do you do after a god walks into your city, throws your social order into a blender, and turns your king into an example? You wait. You remember. You pass down the story like a wound disguised as a fable. And yet here's the strangest part. You feel a little lighter, a little more awake, as if Dionysus didn't just shatter Thebes for revenge, but to reveal something. That masks hide truths. That pride blinds. That order can become a cage. And that sometimes madness is the only way out. There's an old fringe anecdote, never verified, likely apocryphal, that a small conservative town in Greece banned all depictions of Dionysus after a local performance of the Bacchae led to a public brawl and 2 weddings being called off. The priests called it divine interference. The locals called it the most exciting night of the year. Either way, Dionysus smiled. You're still walking. The air is different, less tense. The city feels quieter, humbled. People speak softer now. They don't argue as much. It's as if the entire population was slapped with a very theatrical, told you so. And somewhere in a shadow, you sense Dionysus again. He's watching, not with cruelty, with satisfaction. This is what he wanted all along, not just obedience, not even worship. Recognition, to be seen as real, not folklore, not fringe, but divine. The first theater wasn't built to honor Dionysus. It was built to survive him. And now the next act waits. The stage creaks beneath your feet. Not a real one, not yet. Just a clearing worn by footsteps flattened by dances that ended in both laughter and screams. You stand in the aftermath of Thebes staring into the forest, and you realize that was theater. The blood, the costume, the revelation. All of it. And the audience mortals. Confused. Horrified. Changed. Dionysus didn't just make them watch. He cast them. You thought theater came from art, beauty, a desire to tell stories. But Dionysus didn't invent theater for storytelling. He invented it to trap people in their own delusions and let them watch themselves collapse publicly, dramatically, and with thunderous applause. You take a few slow steps through the dust. The wind carries the scent of burnt thyme and crushed grapes. In the distance, you hear the faint echo of sandals stomping in rhythm. It's not a battlefield. It's a rehearsal. The very first stage was likely a simple patch of ground with a circle of watchers. No curtains, no balconies. Just a space where the line between performer and spectator dissolved. And that was exactly what Dionysus wanted. You see it happening again. In Athens this time. A new city, bigger, busier, but still fragile in all the same ways. A people desperate to appear rational and enlightened, but still terrified of their own shadow selves. Enter Dionysus. This time, not in disguise. He's been granted a festival, an official one. It's called the City Dionysia, a days-long explosion of wine drama and democracy. On the surface, it's civic pride. Underneath, it's divine infiltration. You're in the crowd now. The benches are packed, citizens clutching figs and amphoras of wine. Jokes flying, sandals off. Even the priests look tipsy. But the stage is sacred. It's not a place to perform. It's a place to reveal. Historians trace the roots of tragedy to the dithyramb, a choral hymn sung to Dionysus, usually with a lot of leaping and wailing and goat-related costumes. And yes, it's from this chaotic cauldron that drama begins to take shape. First, one actor breaks from the chorus, then two, then three. Dialogue is born. Character, plot. The beginnings of theater as we know it. But those masks? They are not props. They are offerings. Each mask allows a performer to step outside themselves, to become someone else, or something else. To embody pain, pride, desire, without the shame of owning it. And in doing so, the audience sees themselves reflected back, just like in Thebes. You scan the faces around you. Some are laughing, others crying. One man sits frozen, as if the actor on stage just said something meant only for him. That's Dionysus. Not in the script, but in the effect. He's in the moment the actor's voice cracks, in the pregnant pause between lines, in the hush when the chorus speaks as one. The first theater wasn't built of marble. It was built of silence, tension, the electricity of shared witnessing, and Dionysus. He made it addictive. There's a fringe theory that early audiences were required to undergo fasting and purification before watching tragedies, as if the play was a kind of religious initiation. No popcorn, no previews, just raw ritualized confrontation. You can believe it, because even now, sitting on a stone bench with 100 other bodies pressed around you, you're not watching a play. You're being undone by one. And Dionysus stands backstage, always with his arms crossed and his head tilted just enough to say, "Let's see who breaks next." He doesn't need to act anymore. Others do it for him. He doesn't need to crash cities anymore. They build altars to him on their own. The play is the revenge now. And you're in the front row. You blink, and suddenly the masks are everywhere. Hung on walls, laid across stone benches, painted on pottery carved into marble. Some smiling, some weeping, some staring with wide, unblinking eyes that somehow feel like they see you, not just your face, but what's behind it. You step closer. One mask looks happy. Too happy. The kind of joy that borders on hysteria. Another bears a look of sorrow so profound it aches, just to meet its gaze. Comedy and tragedy. Two sides of the same coin minted by a god who never told you which one he preferred. Dionysus watches behind everyone. The masks weren't just practical, you realize. Ancient theaters were massive tens of thousands of people, all seated in open air. A bare face would disappear. But a mask? It transformed the body, amplified the voice, elevated the emotion to something mythic. But the real reason? It was protection. Protection from what you wonder from truth. Because when you wear a mask, you're not lying. You're finally allowed to be. That's what Dionysus teaches. That the self is a performance. That identity is fluid and fragile, and not always your choice. Historians still argue whether the use of masks in Greek theater was purely functional or deeply symbolic. Of course, with Dionysus, nothing is ever just one thing. A tool is a symbol. A symbol is a spell. A spell is a stage direction. And what happens when everyone's in costume? You lose track of who's real. That's where the madness starts. You see it in the actors first. The way they move, stiff stylized, like they're channeling something rather than choosing it. Their lines don't always make sense. Not logically, but emotionally, they cut. Then the chorus begins. Speaking as one. A collective voice. A collective mind. And suddenly, the audience isn't just watching. They're absorbing. They're slipping into the same rhythm, breathing at the same moments, gasping in unison. It's not hypnosis. It's communion. You realize then that theater in its original form wasn't about entertainment. It was exorcism. A community gathered, put on its masks, and confronted the unbearable death fate guilt wore the gods and lived to talk about it. Except some didn't. Some left changed. Some left undone. And some, just a few, never came back at all. There's a curious little tale buried in one of Aristotle's lesser-read footnotes about a man who attended a particularly intense tragedy and began to believe he was one of the characters. He dressed like him, spoke like him, and eventually disappeared into the hills, where rumor has it he was found years later dancing in a Dionysian rite. Naked, smiling. Dionysus, you suspect, kept his program. You take your seat again, blending into the crowd. A new play begins. The masks come out. This one's about a king, of course. They always are. He's proud, he's loud, he offends the gods. You sigh. You've seen this before. But then, the chorus turns. They're not just narrating. They're accusing. Not the king. The audience. You freeze. Suddenly, the spotlight feels hot on your neck. Your hands grip your knees a little tighter. Is it your imagination? Or are the actors looking directly at you? This is the Dionysian effect. The story stops being distant. It infects. Because Dionysus never wanted art that stayed on the stage. He wanted theater that crawled down the aisles, whispered in your ear, and made you rethink your choices. And the masks. They aren't there to hide you. They're there to invite you in. By wearing someone else's face, you're free to face yourself. You think of Pentheus again, of Agave, of all the mortals who laughed at the wrong moment, who thought they could spectate from a safe distance. There is no distance, not in this theater, not in Dionysus's domain. You rise to your feet, and suddenly you're not watching anymore. You're performing. You awaken to sound, no music, not quite melody, but rhythm. Pounding, syncopated, irregular, yet irresistible. Drums, flutes, and voices, some laughing, some sobbing, some caught in a note go along. It feels like the scream of the earth itself. You've arrived at the festival of Dionysus, and it is nothing like what you imagined. The city, Dionysia, Athens. Once a year for several days in spring, the city turns itself inside out. The government shuts down. Business stops. Even trials are paused. Why? Because it's time to honor the god of theater. And by honor we mean party like civilization depends on it. You push through the crowd, thousands packed into the city, citizens and slaves alike. People wear garlands of ivy, their breath reeks of wine, and everyone seems just a little too happy or a little too close to tears. That's the Dionysian way, either or. No in-betweens. You make your way toward the Theater of Dionysus, a massive open-air structure carved into the southern slope of the Acropolis. You can't help but pause at the sight. It's not just a theater, it's a temple. The stage is circular. The seats rise in perfect arcs. At the center is the Timel, the altar to Dionysus. Every performance begins with a sacrifice, a real one. The god must be fed before the audience can be, and then the plays begin. 3 days of tragedy, 1 of comedy, 1 of satyr plays, which are exactly what they sound like. Half-naked mischief, crude jokes, inappropriate flute solos, and more than one man dressed as a donkey doing unspeakable things to furniture. Because balance right, you settle onto the stone, the crowd rustling beside you, fig juice drying sticky on your fingers. The sun's just rising. You're bleary-eyed, but you can't look away. On the stage, actors appear. And here's the astonishing thing. These plays, these ancient works, are anal fictional distractions. They're sacred acts. To perform is to worship. To watch is to participate. You squint as Aeschylus's words thunder across the stage. A tale of justice, revenge, family curses. His chorus moves like a single organism. The actors wear masks so expressive you forget they're made of stiff linen and plaster. And you understand this is mass therapy. The citizens of Athens gather to see their own fears, played out their own arrogance, dismantled their grief, echoed and soothed through rhythm and ritual. Historians agree that the city Dionysia served a civic purpose, helping Athenians process war, democracy, and loss. But one fringe idea suggests it was also used to identify those who couldn't handle it. The ones who broke down, shouted at the stage, or wandered off into the sea afterward. A kind of divine litmus test curated by Dionysus. And who won this madness? The playwrights. Each year they competed. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Dramatists, summoned from the depths of philosophical nightmares to win a crown of ivy and a moment of glory. Imagine being told your job is to move the soul of a city or else, and somehow they did it. Their stories endure not because they were old, but because they were true. They tapped into the raw underbelly of human nature and dared to hold it up for applause. A chorus wails, an actor stumbles, a god appears, sometimes literally, and the audience gasps as one. You sit there for hours, then days. Time slips. You cry, you laugh, you shift between lives, between masks, between selves. And Dionysus, he's everywhere. In the laughter that turns manic, in the silence that follows a gut punch line, in the way the actor trembles after the curtain falls, not out of exhaustion, out of possession. There's an old vase painting that shows Dionysus behind the stage, holding a mask in one hand and a mirror in the other. No one knows its origin, but you've seen it. Not in a museum, in your mind. He's still holding that mirror up to you now. The festival ends with a procession. Torches, music, a statue of Dionysus carried through the streets like a rock star on a chariot. Drunken citizens stumble behind, chanting, singing, some half-dressed, some not dressed at all. And no one stops them, because madness is allowed, expected when it's for a god. Especially this one. The sun sets on Athens. The city sobers up. The market reopens. Trials resume, but something lingers in the air. A change, a presence. You feel it, don't you? You've watched the plays. You've worn the mask. You've seen what lies beneath. And Dionysus. He's not done with you yet. You're backstage now. Not metaphorically, literally. Behind the painted scenery beyond the choral circle, in the dim, smoky corners where the actors change masks and whisper forgotten lines to themselves like incantations. It smells of sweat and oil. The air is thick with nervous breath and pine smoke. Costumes hang like ghosts on hooks. And standing in the center of it all is someone you didn't expect to find here. The playwright, Aeschylus. Or maybe it's Euripides. Or someone less famous, but just as terrified. Because in ancient Athens, writing a play wasn't an artistic hobby. It was divine duty. Dangerous sacred work that could win you glory or get you booed out of the city. You watch the writer pace. He's muttering. Not to himself, but to someone unseen. You lean in. He's praying. To Dionysus. Not politely, not formally. He's bargaining, pleading, as if he knows he's not just writing for the audience, but for the god himself. And he is. You see, the playwrights aren't entirely in control, not when they're writing for Dionysus. Some say the inspiration came like a storm, sudden, uninvited, overwhelming. Words flowed, visions blurred into verse, and the play. It just happened. One fringe theory suggests that many early tragedians believed they were written by Dionysus while composing, that their minds became vessels like the Maenads in the woods, only instead of dancing, they bled ink onto papyrus. It's not far-fetched. You've seen what his influence does on stage, and the playwrights? They're not safe from it either. You step out of the shadows and into the wings. A performance is underway. It's Medea, a tale of betrayal, revenge, and divine fury. And Euripides doesn't hold back. Medea doesn't just cry. She destroys. Her children, her husband, her enemies, herself. The audience is silent. Uncomfortably so. You scan the faces, some horrified, some enraptured. And one man in the front row. He's crying so hard he's forgotten to blink. That's the Dionysian effect. The story reaches places polite society doesn't dare go. It exposes rot. It asks impossible questions. It doesn't offer clean answers. And it leaves you with your jaw slack and your heart pounding. Was that play meant to entertain? No. It was meant to initiate. Each tragedy is a ritual. Each performance a summoning. The actors aren't reciting lines, they're channeling forces older than Athens, older than reason itself. And the playwrights. You watch Euripides, again standing off to the side, eyes fixed on the stage like a man watching someone else's dream come true or come apart. He's not smiling. He knows what he's done. The myth of Pentheus again comes to mind. You've seen it dramatized differently by each playwright. In Aeschylus's version, there's dread. In Euripides's, there's gleeful cruelty. And in the version whispered by bards in taverns, Pentheus never dies. He just wakes up again and again, still wearing the mask, still trying to tear it off. Historians still debate how much the dramatists believed in Dionysus as an actual deity versus a metaphor. But when you see how carefully they craft the role of fate, how often it speaks through madness, disguise, and divine prank, it's hard to argue that they didn't feel his presence. One line from the Bacchae always echoes, you mock the god, and he makes a theater of your life. You look at the stage again. It's Medea's final monologue. She's standing in a chariot pulled by dragons. Her children lie dead behind her. Jason is on his knees. And she doesn't weep. She smiles, because the gods helped her, specifically Helios. But the tone, that eerie blend of triumph and tragedy, that's Dionysus. And the audience, they erupt, not with joy, but with something more primal, as if they're releasing breath they didn't know they were holding, as if they've survived something. They have. So has the playwright. He bows, but not to the people. He looks to the altar, to the center of the theater, to Dionysus, and you follow his gaze. You half expect to see the god sitting there sipping wine, nodding smugly. But the seat is empty. Because Dionysus doesn't need to sit in the audience. He's in the audience, in the whispering, in the shivers, in the moment when the actor forgets their lines and something else takes over, in the way you're not sure if what you're feeling is catharsis or corruption. That's the playwriting trap. You don't write to control the story. You write to surrender. And if you're lucky, the god applauds. If not, well, you become the next act. You're on the move again. The city has faded. The chatter of Athenian theatergoers, the scrolls of playwrights, the carved stone seats of the amphitheater all gone. You hear no drums now. Only crickets, leaves, and something far off that could either be a howl or laughter or both. You're headed into the woods. Not just any woods. These are sacred, wild, untamed. The kind of place where boundaries dissolve not just between trees and sky, but between sanity and something deeper. Darker, freer. This is Maenad territory. And if you think you've seen all there is to Dionysus, you haven't met his real followers yet. You tread carefully. You should, because the Maenads aren't background dancers in a play. They're the living pulse of Dionysus's chaos. Women mostly. Women who've stepped or been pulled outside the structure of Greek society. Women who've stopped obeying the rules, stopped asking for permission. They move like wind and fire, hair loose, feet bare, eyes wild. You catch sight of one, and your breath hitches. She's swaying under a moonbeam face, tilted to the stars. Her hands are painted berries' blood. Both she hums a tune that isn't music, so much as a spell, and you realize something very important. You are not in charge here. The Maenads were known in myth and ritual alike. Their name means raving ones. And while they've been romanticized over time, painted as carefree, half-naked forest dancers, their origin is far more intense. They were holy. They were dangerous. And sometimes they were your neighbor before she vanished one night and came back with wildflowers braided into her hair and a look that said, "Don't ask." You crouch behind a tree, watching as more gather. They chant, they laugh, they raise their hands in unison, calling down something from the sky, and the air shifts. Dionysus is near. He doesn't need to appear in body. His presence is enough. The vines twist more aggressively. The breeze takes on the taste of pomegranates. A fawn stumbles into the clearing, and they coo at it, not sweetly, but like a storm watching a leaf. One fringe legend says that true Maenads could tear apart animals with their bare hands, not because they were physically strong, but because they were possessed, taken over, not just by emotion, by divinity, by him. You believe it now. The fawn twitches nervously. You look away. Better not to know what happens next. Historians have long debated the nature of Maenadic rites. Some say they were dramatized myth, not literal practice. Others suggest they were part of mystery cults, ecstatic initiations, performed deep in the woods where wine dance and trance led to a kind of spiritual death and rebirth. Whatever the case, you're seeing it with your own eyes. These women aren't lost. They're freed. Freed from identity, from motherhood, from marriage, from modesty, from the relentless structure of a world that says, this is who you must be. And when the music rises, low flutes, goatskin drums, the whisper of feet through pine needles, they move as one. No choreography. Just instinct. And somewhere within that chaos, you begin to understand why Dionysus trusted them more than priests, more than kings, more than the rigid marble of Olympus. Because these women don't pretend. They are. And Dionysus, he doesn't demand worship. He invites you to dissolve. You catch your reflection in a pool of water. Your face is still your own. For now. But what if you stepped into the clearing? What if you stopped hiding? What if you let go of the idea that you're separate, that you're a spectator, that your thoughts belong only to you? Would you become a maenad? Would you want to? You back away. Slowly. Carefully. Because while the maenads are mesmerizing, they are also terrifying. They hold a kind of power society has never known what to do with female ecstasy. That doesn't serve, doesn't tame, doesn't apologize. One of them catches your eye. She doesn't blink. She smiles. You're not sure if she sees you or sees through you. And then she vanishes into the trees. You sit on a rock heart, pounding. What have you just witnessed? Not just a dance, not just a myth, a ritual that has echoed through centuries in every moment. Someone has stepped outside their role and said no more. And Dionysus. He's not clapping. He's thrumming inside your chest. You leave the forest behind, like waking from a dream you don't entirely want to forget, but can't quite hold on to. The trees seem to watch you as you go. The air still hums with that monadic energy, electric and ancient, but it begins to fade. The world is shifting again. You're not in Greece anymore. Now you're in Rome. And oh, the Romans. They never met a god they couldn't rebrand. You wander through marble streets, past columned villas and sculpted gardens. It's cleaner, louder somehow, more self-conscious than Athens ever was. Everything smells like perfume, ambition, and roasted meat. And somewhere beneath all that pomp and organization, Dionysus is trying to fit in. Trying. Here they call him Bacchus. Same god, new name, new outfit. Less chaos on the surface anyway. You see his face on coins now. On wine jugs, carved into bathhouse fountains. He's smiling still, but it's a different kind of smile. As if he's aware of the irony. Because Rome didn't adopt him out of love. They did it because they couldn't ignore him anymore. At first they tried. The Roman Senate was deeply suspicious of his cult. Too wild, too foreign, too feminine. They liked their gods with clean edges and proper rituals. Dionysus didn't do edges. He did ecstasy. He did masks and madness and truths no one wanted to face. And when his rites began spreading through the countryside, secret meetings, nocturnal dances, rumors of blood and transformation, the Senate panicked. In 186 BCE, they passed the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a decree outlawing the Bacchic rites unless specifically approved by the government. That's right. Rome made partying illegal. You can almost hear Dionysus laughing. Because what's more delicious to a god of rebellion than becoming forbidden? You slip into one of the underground gatherings. It's dark, lit by oil lamps and candle smoke. Women, men, slaves, and citizens all huddled close, whispering hymns in the old tongue. There's a rhythm beneath it all, foot-tapping heart, syncing the slow build of something just on the edge of surrender. You're watching religion evolve, not out of temples, out of tension. The worship of Bacchus becomes a coded language, a space for those who don't fit into Rome's neatly labeled boxes. Outsiders, runaways, poets, women, lovers of the wrong kind. People who are tired of being polite. And Bacchus Dionysus embraces them all. No judgment, just invitation. Historians still argue over what the Bacchic rites really involved. Were they scandalous orgies? Or exaggerated smear campaigns by the Senate? Did they involve true religious ecstasy, or just a cover for political dissent? Probably all of the above. And that's the beauty of Dionysus. He's whatever you fear most. To Rome, he was the god of losing control, of letting the emotions beneath the surface erupt. And Rome feared emotion. They were builders, senators, engineers of empire. They didn't know what to do with a god who said, "Feel it." All of it. So they tried to tame him, gave him temples, statues, festivals with curfews. You walk through one, now Liberalia, a spring festival honoring Bacchus as a god of wine and freedom. There are masks, toasts, Old men blessing young boys as they put away their childhood togas. It's charming. It's toothless. You see the mask, but not the madness. The performance, but not the passion. And for a moment, you wonder, has Dionysus lost? But then you catch a whisper. A woman with ivy in her hair slipping into an alley. A man trailing behind her with a flute tucked under his cloak. A scent of something sweet and smoky on the air. It's still happening. Not on the Senate floor. In the shadows. In secret. That's where Dionysus thrives. There's a statue of Bacchus in a quiet garden. He leans lazily against a tree holding a cup. A lion sleeps at his feet. He looks almost serene, almost soft, but his eyes, they're watching. Because even in Rome, even amid marble and order and law, he never stops being what he is, a god of the uncontained. You leave the garden slowly. Behind you, the mask smiles. You walk alone now, but not in silence. The echoes follow you of flutes of laughter, of screams half muffled by ancient trees. They trail behind like a second shadow, whispering fragments of every performance you've watched, every mask you've worn. You try to shake it off. You try to find something solid, but that's the trick Dionysus played on the world. Once theater was born, it could never go back. You wander through centuries. The vines are gone, replaced by cathedrals. The masks are hidden, replaced by altars and sermons. Rome has fallen. Greece is memory. The stages are empty, at least for now. And still the god laughs. Because Dionysus was never just about wine or madness, or women dancing under moonlight. He was about the spaces between things, order and chaos, actor and audience, the line between pretend and real. And long after the priests tried to bury him, his fingerprints stayed on every curtain, on every script, on every moment when someone says, "Let's put on a play." You step into medieval Europe now. The air smells of wax and damp stone. The theater is gone, replaced by morality, plays staged in church courtyards, allegories, not tragedies, lessons, not ecstasies. And yet, look closer. There's still a little Dionysus in there, the performer who winks when he shouldn't, the laugh that bubbles up during the devil's monologue, the actor who stays in costume too long, like maybe he doesn't want to come back to himself just yet. The church tried to ban the old gods, called them pagan, dangerous, demonic. But Dionysus didn't mind. He didn't need temples. He had the human heart. The Renaissance comes, and with it, boom, Shakespeare. Now we're talking. You stand at the Globe Theater shoulder to shoulder with fishmongers and merchants and a drunk man trying to climb the stage. A jester dances. A witch curses. A king murders. And you realize Dionysus is back, not in name, but in essence. Historians like to credit the Renaissance with rebirthing drama. But from where exactly? From the same place where Dionysus always lives beneath the surface, waiting, watching, rewriting the script. You see him in the fools who speak truth in riddles, in the lovers who lose themselves to passion, in the ghosts who refuse to stay dead, in the audience gasping, laughing, aching. Theater evolves, changes shape, but the bones remain the same. Performance, emotion, transformation. In Paris, it's Molière dodging censors while staging farces that mock hypocrisy. In Italy, Commedia dell'arte truppa roam the countryside, spinning stories with slapstick masks and improvised madness. In Germany, Sturm und Drang spills raw feeling onto the stage like wine on marble, and Dionysus watches it all. One quirky footnote from a 17th century diary claims a French actor who played Bacchus went mad after opening night and insisted on being carried around in a cart of grapes for the rest of his life. The public called it a curse. But you know better. Sometimes the mask sticks. You arrive in the 19th century now, gaslight flickering velvet curtains, opera houses built like temples. The theater is respectable again. Grand, proper. But backstage, someone's laughing. It's Dionysus. He never liked velvet much. In the 20th century, something shifts. Theater explodes. Realism, absurdism, experimental work with no scripts, no plot, just raw, trembling presence. Performance art, flash mobs, films where actors break the fourth wall and stare directly at you, and you stare back, still wondering, am I watching this, or is it watching me? That's the old question. That's Dionysus. Even now, in the modern age of screens and scripts and streaming, the god hasn't gone. You see him in the cult following of a midnight show. In the tears you cry during a monologue you didn't expect to hurt. In the standing ovation that feels like a kind of exorcism. In the actor who forgets where their performance ends and real life begins. Theater is no longer a temple. It's everywhere. The subway performer, the drag queen in glitter, the improv group in a cafe basement, the TikTok skit that goes viral because it touches a nerve no one knew they had, and behind it all, still directing, still smirking Dionysus. You can't unsee him now. Every time someone pretends, every time someone transforms, every time an audience leans forward, he's there, script in hand, wine in the other, and a wink that says, "You thought this was just a play." The lights dim now, not on a stage, but in your mind. You're drifting through the present, but with ancient shadows trailing behind. You start noticing things you'd missed before. That audition flyer taped to a lamppost. That street musician improvising a love song with a plastic straw. That old man reciting Hamlet under his breath in the park like it's a prayer. And you realize, he never left. Dionysus has simply changed his mask, again. In this century, he wears many. Not just the jester or the tragic hero, but the influencer, the podcaster, the performance artist live streaming her own breakdown with a glitter filter. You step into a black box theater. It's small. Just 20 chairs and a single floodlight. The script tonight loosely based on Euripides. Or maybe Kafka. Or maybe it's just vibes. The lead actor plays 6 roles. Sometimes he's Oedipus. Sometimes he's his therapist. At one point, he's a vending machine and the audience. They are silent, not confused, entranced, because something is happening here, not on the surface, deeper, between the lines. That same old spell. You catch a woman wiping her eyes beside you, a man clenching his fists, someone else laughing too loudly at a line that wasn't meant to be funny. This is not entertainment. It's confrontation, transformation, ritual even now, and Dionysus, the god of masks and madness of theater and catharsis, watches from the wings. Maybe literally. Maybe he's the guy operating the spotlight. Maybe he's already on stage. And just like that, it clicks. You were never meant to sit still in a seat. You were never meant to be just the audience. That was the trick all along. You too are in the cast. That moment when you fake a smile in the elevator performance. That time you gave a speech and your voice trembled and people felt it. That theater. That awkward date where you said all the right things while your stomach was a knot mask. Life isn't separate from the stage. It is the stage. You don't get a script. You get improvisation. You get light cues and missed entrances and scenes that feel written by someone else. And Dionysus. He loves it. Not because it's polished, because it's alive. There's a fringe belief whispered by actors never written down that before opening night, if you say his name 3 times alone in a darkened theater, he'll appear and bless the show, or ruin it, depending on his mood. No one admits to trying it. Everyone has. The play ends. The lights rise. The actors bow breathless, sweat-slick mascara running. And you rise too. Not just from your chair, but from something older. Something cracked open inside you. You step out into the city. The streets hum with their own kind of performance now. Horns, footsteps, streetlights flickering like curtain calls. A man in a banana costume hands out flyers. A child recites lines from a commercial in perfect cadence. Someone yells encore at a busker, and you smile. Because this isn't just coincidence. This is legacy. Dionysus doesn't need temples or forests or wine-drenched women tearing apart deer. He needs eyes. He needs ears. He needs people willing to lose themselves even briefly in a moment that blurs the line between pretend and truth. And you've already crossed that line. You've seen Thebes fall. You've worn the mask. You've felt the script take over. And now you're ready for the next act. But first, let it all slow down. Let the curtain fall. Let the lights fade. Breathe in and out. The stage is dark now. The music has stopped. The audience has gone quiet. But somewhere in a little corner of your heart, the echo of Dionysus lingers softly humming like a backstage light, still glowing after the show ends. Let your body grow heavy. Let your thoughts wander without direction, like ivy curling around a forgotten column. You've seen a god tonight, not one of thunder or war, but one who speaks in sighs, in gasps, in applause. Remember the masks, how they hid, how they revealed. Remember the maenads dancing, breaking, becoming. Remember the playwrights possessed by voices that were not their own, yet somehow truer than truth. And now, let it fade. There's no need to hold the script anymore. Let it drift from your hands like a petal on still water. Let the roles dissolve. Let the spotlight dim. You are not a king. You're not a fool. You're not Pentheus. You're not Agave. You're simply you. And that perhaps is the most divine role of all. So close your eyes. Let the applause in your chest soften into silence. The play is over. The god has left the theater. But if you listen very closely, you might still hear his laughter curled like mist in the dark. Soft, playful, endless. Good night. 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 Good night.